Chapter 5. Over the years. The conflict between friendship and business. It's inevitable. Over the years and during your life, you will witness people you know feel the pressures or find themselves in financial hardship. Sometimes that wasn't of their making. I felt it an important topic to discuss, as I'm sure as the day is long, most of you will have come across someone that tried to confuse your ability in helping them in a business deal as a free meal ticket. Or even worse still, they should be given a pass. I've been nothing less than humbled to have been around and worked with some of the most principled people, not just in organised crime, but also what mainstream society has to offer. But as much as I've gotten to work and meet the best, but also the worst. For me and my chosen type of work, the simple fact the worst exist can in some respects be of benefit, and a reminder that greed sometimes knows no limits. It's not that their bullshit and cowardice conning ways are appreciated, but it highlights there are good people in this world, and that level of good is something I value and respect. Money is something that can easily change a weak-minded person's view on integrity and their lack of morals. Others already had a stain on their soul. Over the years, I've helped out countless people. Some have been friends and so-called friends. With others, it was strictly business. I've introduced parties, helped people get funding and investment, licenses and permissions, land and premises. Sometimes the bit of business doesn't work out, which is understandable, but when it does, and everyone involved earns a big lump of cash or an ongoing income, I expect to be looked after a little bit for my efforts, bearing in mind that if it wasn't for me, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. Company shareholders and investors get paid, and a return for their efforts and invested time too. People have come to me more times than I care to remember and said, "See, I've got A, B and C, if I can just get X, Y, Z, we'll make a fortune." Half the time, when I deliver them the X, Y, Z, they become far too busy to call me, or it turns out that actually, there wasn't quite so much profit in the deal after all, and the "will make a fortune" suddenly becomes "they'll make a fortune." There are several ways to deal with this scenario, and sometimes I use a combination of them. The first is to demand my cut and collect on it, which is fairly self-explanatory. Why would the agreed rates that you shook on that guaranteed your return now be less? Can you imagine taking a flight and after successfully and without incident arriving at your destination only then saying, "Yeah, not bad, but I'm only paying half of the agreed ticket price"? The way I look at it is, I've trusted you on your end of the deal. I've successfully delivered on my end. So now pay up. Services rendered. The second is to shut the work down altogether by making a call to the other party, because one out of the two sides will usually have loyalties to me. I'm known for getting results on every level, and that's why people come to me. The third method is to never ever open another door for that person again. Believe it or not, I have had people with the audacity to call me up years later and ask for another favour. When they don't get it, they suddenly wish that they'd done right by me in the first place, because the move currently on the table is always worth even more than the last one was. So it costs them dearly in the long run. It's not always money on offer. In return for helping people out, protecting people and putting deals together, I've been promised shares and partnerships in all sorts of things, both legit and otherwise. A common line is, "If you help me with this, Carlton, I'll set us up in business. You'll have a regular income for the rest of your life." The most popular businesses on offer have been a legit debt collection agency. I've been promised about 20 of those. Pubs and bars, flipping properties and land deals. Needless to say, 9 out of 10 have been bullshit. There are of course several stand-up people I can count on, and for whom my phone will always be available, and it's the likes of these that keep my faith in humanity. As it's been said, integrity and principles aren't reserved just for a few. Most people know the difference between right and wrong. Sadly, the list of dependable people is far shorter than the list of letdowns. If I wrote the letdown list, I imagine I'd have Greta and her eco-warriors at my door for wasting paper. But my MO has always been one of quality over quantity. When me and Jay were lining up new bits of work, one of the people I called was Jazz, a former club owner who I'd met back when I was running doors. Jazz owned Shades in Gravesend, Kent. We'd hit it off and remained friends for over 18 years by this point. Jazz and I had some great times over those years. Laughs, parties, successes. When the three of us met up, we had a great catch-up. Jazz told us how he'd just been pulled over on the way for speeding and had to put on an American accent when talking to the old Bill because he was using a US driver's license, having been banned in the UK. Jazz was a rarity in that he was very clever, a great businessman, but also he pulled in people he could trust to come along for the ride, even if he wasn't 100% sure he'd need them, because he was happy to share the wealth, if it meant keeping a group of mates working together. This wasn't bad business sense, it was long-term thinking. Unfortunately, he didn't have a need for the setup we had at the time, but he told us details of what he was working on, which was to be kept an absolute secret. He'd bought an old distillery and all the equipment to make his own vodka. He'd also contracted 2 big names in the UK rap scene to front the brand. He took us to his car and showed us the prototype bottles and labels he'd made. "Carlton, I want you with me on this one. It will be a good thing for us over the next 2 years. Then I'm 99% sure that one of the big groups will swoop in to buy the brand up. We'll be set for our retirements, mate." It sounded great, and Jazz was no bullshitter. I told him we should let the youngsters crack on with the legwork, and the 2 of us would be there to oversee and steer the ship. I told Jay on the way home how confident I was in Jazz's plans, and in the months to come, Jay met up with Jazz or his people at least once a month. Now, money isn't earned until it's in your hand, but this was looking good. One afternoon I was sitting in the conservatory when my phone rung. I looked and it was Jazz's wife's number. I figured he was calling me from her phone, but no, it was his wife, and she sounded terrible in her voice. That feeling of impending doom came over me. I thought she was going to say he was in the hospital after a heart attack, but she explained that after feeling unwell, Jazz had been taken into hospital. Turns out he had cancer, and he never came back out of there. I don't know what happened to the vodka plans. I guess they died along with Jazz, but that was irrelevant. I was absolutely gutted to have lost an old friend, one who would always call me periodically just to chat, one who would tell me straight if I was doing something that he thought I shouldn't, a mate who, whenever I saw his name flush up on my phone, always made me smile. It's a sad thought knowing that I'll never see that name come up, or hear that enthusiastic and welcoming voice with a, "Hello, C, what's going on, brother?" Rest in peace, Jazz. In business, there is nothing worse than a combination of a man's ego, his ignorance, and a belief that corners being cut won't come back to bite you in the arse. This next story is an example of just that. It all started when an accountant I know called me one day and asked me to go to his offices. He said I might be able to help a friend of his, so we set a meeting for later that week. At the meeting, I was informed that this chap, Harry, had recently bought 50 acres of greenbelt land in Essex, and even though greenbelt isn't worth as much as normal land, it's still a fair few quid, so money-wise, I took this guy seriously. His problem was, he'd overstretched in buying the land, leveraged his other business, his house, the usual stuff, and subsequently had needed some short-term cash to stay afloat. I could guess what was coming next in this story. Harry had fallen into the big dark hole that is underground money lending and was, at this point, under serious pressure to meet repayments. Usually, there's nothing that I'm prepared to do to help in this situation, because you borrowed the money, so you have to pay it back. Morally, it's a difficult case to argue on the borrower's behalf, but with the potentially development value of the land, perhaps I could help him to renegotiate his debts. The next big problem when providing services to someone in money trouble is, how the fuck do you get paid? I put this to Harry and he told me that if I helped him, he'd make me a legal partner in the business, so when the land eventually got planning consent, we'd both be quids in. Dubious, I ran the concept past a few people I know in the property development arena, and they came back with fairly positive thoughts. It wasn't going to be too difficult to renegotiate Harry's repayments and buy him the time he said he needed if I just called in a favour or two, so I accepted his offer. If I could turn back the clock, I would have had to politely decline the proposal and leave the fella to sort his own mess out, but hindsight is a wonderful thing, as they say. Bearing in mind, the plan for the land was to have planning consent within 18 months, then sell the land to a large house builder and be out of it all inside 2 years. You can imagine my dismay when the saga was continuing 10 years later. I can't go into all the full details, but across this decade of ups and downs, I've had to go and have chats with counsellors. My guys have delivered numerous envelopes. I've supported Harry in several bids to keep renegotiating his street debts and buy him just a little more time, all to no avail. About 2 years in, I started to wonder how this Harry guy could be so unlucky after all. He had it all worked out. I got my people to do some digging, even interview Harry and asked to go through the paperwork. It emerged that he didn't own the land at all. He had an option agreement on the land, meaning he paid rent on the land whilst owning the sole rights to broker a sale with a good commission built in. So now we know why he was getting into debt, to pay the rent on 50 acres. With all the money down the pan, we could have been flipping 4 to 5 house renovations a year and making a great living. But people just have to go in for the big time, wanting to become a millionaire overnight. The number of times he'd spun me a yarn and said, "We're almost there, Carlton. By the end of the summer we'll be exchanging sale contracts." Then it was, "Just before Christmas, Carlton. Bear with it. And in the new year, Carlton, as soon as the solicitors are back at work." Around the time I was thinking about an exit strategy, Jay came to see me. He'd become more suspicious than usual of the most recent story from Harry and not wanting me to be getting mugged off. He had done some finding out. After some desperate stunts Harry had pulled with the landowners, they had gone to court to get him off of the land. He'd lost the lot. I was insulted that Harry thought he could pull the wool over my eyes like that. Why did he think I have handpicked people wrapped round me? I mean, I don't need to be everywhere and looking into everything myself. I have people to help me keep on top of things. I'd given him squeeze after squeeze for his lies in the hope of this thing actually coming off, although each time I had let him know I knew he'd lied and that I wasn't actually falling for his bullshit. I was just letting him off lightly. But that was that. I would take my severance pay and move on. I'd come out up. But what a lot of wasted time and an absolute fucking headache. When people try muddying the waters in a hope of hiding their true intentions, but also in an attempt to con me, they're always best to know that me being a born and bred working class East Ender, I, amongst a few others, not only invented and mastered, but also own sole rights to the same game they're trying to play me at. Talk about insulting my intelligence. Let me tell you a tale of two such chances. Neil and Martin were being extorted, a pair of straight goers who had tried to cut a corner in business and unwittingly become entangled in the underworld. They'd been pressured and bullied over the course of about 10 months, handing over thousands of pounds in a series of final settlements. The more the pair of office bod types resisted and tried to state their case, the worse the threats became from these bullies. The straw that broke the camel's back for them was when Martin's elderly father got a visit from these thugs, and luckily for them they were able to get themselves a sit-down with me. I don't fucking like bullying. I equally dislike extortion. If a genuine debt is owed, then it's a different matter. But it's morally wrong to be taking money you haven't earned from people who don't owe it to you. Someone might get away with this practice for a while, but they won't find much support when someone higher up the ladder steps in. So, I agreed a fee with the pair for resolving their issues with this low-level local villain, and told them I don't want a penny until they are satisfied that the guy was off their backs. I didn't think I could be fairer than that. They were over the moon, so I made a call to the bullying twat, and explained that I think his practices are rather unfair, and that I would be representing Neil and Martin in this matter from now on. I suggested that perhaps we should meet up, an invitation that was declined, so I simply left it that should there need to be any further discussion about the issue, it should be done via me and me only. I gave Neil and Martin a phone number, explained that either Jay or myself would be on the other end, and they should call if they hear anything, but other than that, we'd be in touch in a fortnight about payment. 2 weeks passed, and not a word. Jay called one of them and asked if they'd been pressured by anyone, which they hadn't, so Jay organised to meet them and grab my payment. When he went, however, they had less than half the agreed amount. The pair of them were very apologetic, and they also had an idea about an alternative way to pay the owed balance. Armed with fancy brochures and a sales pitch, they explained that they had obtained a load of carbon credit certificates through one of their businesses, which they were going to cash out within a few weeks. If I could kindly allow them some extra time, they'd pay what they owed with a hefty drink on top. Now, they were businessmen, and we had already checked them out to make sure they did actually own these companies. So I agreed to give them a bit of extra time. After all, I knew I'd get it in the end, one way or another. When their time came around again to cough up, Jay met with them to collect the money, but now there was another problem. The funds hadn't cleared yet. Jay marched Martin to an ATM to get a balance and prove their story, and sure enough, there was an uncleared balance of over 100k showing. Previously completely sceptical, even Jay now thought that they might actually pull this off. As sure as day turns to night, the pair of plonkers let us down again each Friday for the next 2 weeks. On the Monday morning, bright and early, Jay dropped a birthday card into Martin's letterbox, then went to Neil's house to have a photo with Neil's Alsatian in his back garden. Within a couple of hours, we had a text message from Martin thanking us for the card and inquiring as to how we knew his date of birth and address. Then Neil was on the phone pleading for an extra 24 hours to pay. The next morning, they paid the balance of my money. Jay convinced Martin to tell him how he'd dummied the ATM balance that day, and we couldn't believe what we heard. He'd paid himself a check-in, knowing that it would just show as uncleared funds until it bounced. Clever, really. Another few weeks wasted on bullshit and unnecessary broken promises. I'd been double fair and would have preferred for them to just tell me from the off that they needed a few weeks to pay. Even with the bit extra I'd charged them for the fucking around, they were still financially better off having come to me for help, and they were happy that they'd no longer get extorted. So you can see that even straight goers will try being dishonest. With me, honesty paves a way of making good of a situation, and that same honesty would have been a cheaper experience for them both, but all's well that ends well. At times I've wondered why the majority of these things haven't worked out, and I concluded that it's a combination of things. First off, I've always been pretty well placed to help people out, so I get asked a lot more than most. Secondly, perhaps I've been too nice or too patient at times. People have pushed me quiet far before I've eventually had to turn on them over these things. But never let it be said that I've bullied or extorted someone, because I've only ever collected what was genuinely owed. Finally, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I.e., if you don't try these things, none of them will ever work out, will they? In life, you live and you learn. But what you do with life's teachings is the important thing, as the saying goes. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. The good news is that I have educated people around me. None are of the mindset of fools when it comes to this line of work. My family and close friends are clued up enough never to put themselves in a position where money becomes an issue or causes conflict. The decades of networking and social structure I work in and amongst doesn't allow people to take the piss. That's a fool's paradise, and I simply don't allow for a loss. Contrary to what some may conclude from reading this chapter, I'm not bitter about these fucktardians. I'm actually angry at myself for allowing their treachery to take place and for so long. There's been genuine people that I could have helped and made their lives a little easier, but instead they've been pushed to the back of the line as a result of the frenzied mass of Judases and Ponces. At this stage of my life and career, and as this book drops, what better time than now to change my phone number and drop out a whole load of people who call me up regularly, pretending to be my friend or looking out for my best interests, yet we both know that they aren't. Their list of wants and demands, favours and needs are reeled off like a kid with their Christmas list. They'll never be useful to me. They'll never bring something to my table. They're hanging around like a bad smell because I'm only useful to them. Well, not anymore. And that's not to say that I require to earn money from a person in order to have them as a mate, because a two-way valued and honest friendship is more than enough for me and something I respect more than the wishes and demanders. But when I know that a person has gone behind my back and hidden something from me to avoid giving me a drink, they can jog right on. There are people that have lived vicariously through me and my name, claiming to be a business acquaintance or even an associate. That has been a regular practice by a few. It's been a common routine for many, but it's time to be honest with yourself. Don't try and be something you're not. It'll only lead to disappointment by trying to emulate someone else and live off their efforts. My life experiences and time in the game are what I've earned, and largely at a cost. As far back as when I was running doors, I can give examples of people I've looked after, brought into the fold, fed, clothed, given work or money to. I've taken in people who just left prison and had fuck all, blokes on the run, lads coming from the coast to find work in land to feed their families. Sooner or later, most of them have taken advantage of my kindness or stabbed me in the back entirely. I've acted with my heart instead of thinking with my head on far too many occasions throughout my life, and as I look back now, there have been many a time when this mistake has been at a cost to my family. Think about it. I invest my time into helping out a guy who's in need of a hand up. Then I help him out with some cash, or I split some work and share the return with him. I could have been selfish and spent the time with my wife and kids or my parents, spent the money on them too, and ended up far better off all round, not just financially. Effectively, I've let certain people into my house and they've robbed me of time and money in a roundabout way. I found that as I became a bit of a commodity, more vultures circled, as did people who wanted to see me fall. People I knew personally and people I didn't know at all would turn on me, either for selfish gain or out of jealousy and spite. There are many people out there who have and do to this day benefit from having been around me, but for most their memories are very short and yet expect my pockets to be deep. They know who they are. Some are sitting in big houses in the Essex countryside surrounded by piles of cash and shiny things, but are their consciences clear? Are they fuck? If a chunk of that change was earned off of my back, don't think I don't know, because I do, and karma will come around in the end. I won't print these people's names, not through fear, but because they don't warrant to share my platform. But if you're reading this, then thank you for the tenner you just put in my pocket. I once took the rap when a bit of work went wrong, and I was looking at a few years away. Out of sheer luck and due to a technicality, everyone got away with it scot-free in the end. But do you know the thanks I got for risking my liberty and going forward and taking the blame? You'd think my family would have been looked after with a few quid, or some plane tickets might have been at the ready in case I wanted to go on the lam. But no. In fact, some of the very people who I was saving from jail time started to say that I was a grass. Without any fucking evidence, they tried to tarnish my name with the worst insult there is in the underworld. By rights, if they genuinely believed that I'd grassed them up, they all got off, remember. They should have done me. I shouldn't be here today, simple. But they didn't come for me. They didn't kill me or even bash me. No one did. Ever. It's because deep down they knew they were just slandering me with no truth behind their nonsense. This is a common play by people you've helped out in life, calling and accusing you of the lowest of actions in organised crime, and by doing so, they honestly believe they've lessened the moral obligation they have, or they can relieve their conscience of the money you put their way. Some good loyal people would tell me about anyone on the street gossiping and passing the lies on. Some of those doing this would still come and work for me, drink and eat with me, never saying a fucking word to my face. So, the ones using the term wrong-un turned out to be the actual wrong-uns themselves. Because if you genuinely believe a criminal is a grass, you certainly don't continue having it with them. And if you don't genuinely believe it, don't say it. I know that 99% of these Judases would jump on it like tramps on chips if I put a bit of lucrative work under their noses. My well-known stance has always been the same. No matter how hard a man is, how big his firm is, or what run of the ladder he's on, if you have a problem with me, let me know to my face, and what will be, will be. Don't be a weasel or a snake and talk about me, come talk to me, but make sure you're in the right if you're accusing me of something so terrible. A common trend I've identified is that the rats deflect from their own wrongdoings by flinging mud everyone else's way, something I recently discussed with a well-known and respected face, Mr. Paul Ferris, who picked up on this tactic much sooner in his career than I did. Paul is a proper staunch, old-school gentleman with whom I have had several mutual friends for many years, if only there were more moral men like him in crime these days. But more about Paul later. Whether you want to call it dirt, intel, info or compromat, I've got that much of it on so many villains that, if I wanted to, I could change the landscape of the underworld in the southeast as we know it. But that will never, ever happen. Those sorts of things will die with me, and frankly, people who know me know that that's why I'm trusted in my world. If I had a fiver for every time one of these mongrels, who previously slagged me off behind my back, ran into me and started offering to buy me drinks and rack me a line up, I'd be rich. From the bottom of my heart, I truly wish them all a long-lasting ill health and a lonely death, which they are more than deserving of. If you thought that this book was going to be confessions of the old-time gangster who repents and forgives every fucker who ever tried to screw him over, you're now up to date and realise you got the wrong man. Again, they hold a lower-than-shark shit existence on this earth, and there will be not a single tear shed on my part if they died as a result of contracting a painful and incurable disease. I can adapt to most situations and settings. I can and have travelled all around the UK and much of Europe, either with a mate or a woman. This is in direct contrast to most of these so-called villains out there who won't or can't leave their manor. They operate and live from either the safety and sanctuary of their armchairs or local patch in Essex, and won't leave unless it's 15-handed. Most of them hate going out of their comfort zone. Some are just hiding in fear, but I've never been difficult to find if someone had a genuine problem with me. The whole underworld and crime scene has sickened me over the last few years. All of the old school chaps are dying off, and our moral codes and way of life is dying too. Look at the stark difference between, say, 1960s East London versus the same place today. We've been on a downward trajectory for decades, and I dread to think what lays ahead. If villainy in the old school is to be represented by the so-called criminals of today, drop me out.